I purchased this ASUS 5K monitor last week, and I'd like to share my first impressions. I am a software engineer that does front-end work, which means other people are giving me designs and I'm interpreting them to craft an interface and coding it up. I am also a hobbyist photographer. I purchased this display because I'm used to the high pixel density displays of the MacBooks. On the left, I have my old monitor, which is also a 27-inch ASUS display, but at a 2K resolution. I thought it would be interesting to compare that old monitor to this new generation of monitor, a roughly 10-year difference. The biggest selling point of the new 5K monitor is absolutely that it's 5K. It will fit 4 2K resolutions within the 5K display size. And the reason people want that is because you get the higher pixel density, not because you want more screen real estate. So if you're the kind of person that's picking at pixels, you can't see the pixels as closely, which is great. Otherwise, the panels are pretty similar. It's the same panel technology. It's it's not OLED, it's not mini LED. It's got a backlight that goes through the monitor. The new monitor is supposedly a little bit brighter and supports HDR if people care about that. It has a higher contrast ratio on paper. It has more colors. Not mentioned here is color accuracy. They're both have the same sRGB coverage, but the new monitor has a little bit more coverage of color gambits that I am not qualified to speak about. But it also has the same gray to gray response time. These are not gaming monitors, but that used to be acceptable at the time, a decade ago. The power usage is down, the weight is down, which is important if you're putting it on a monitor arm because it will wobble less. Actually, it'll wobble less however you're mounting it. The stands have different designs but are quite similar in the feature set where you can rotate and move up and down and side to side. Connectivity is quite a bit different. The main selling point is USB-C. You could do some data with that as well, although there's going to be limits to data transfer speeds because it is not a Thunderbolt display. And you can even charge your phone on that as well. Of course, we're comparing both of these displays to the built-in MacBook Pro display, which has double the refresh rate at 120 Hz, a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio, 1,000 nits of brightness or 1600 for HDR, a similar 1 billion colors, a higher DPI, and of course that reflective glossy display. The 5K display has a stronger matted coating than this previous monitor. It does a much better job of diffusing or spreading the light across the entire monitor instead of having one really big bright spot on the monitor. So if you have a lamp in the background, you don't quite see it as much. What I noticed immediately with the new display is this vignetting effect on the edges and the corners of the display. So here I have pictures where I'm taking it directly on the display and directing it towards the corners versus moving your head over to those edges. So you can really see it's not uniform, but on the old monitor, that was not a problem. Now, despite these vignetting issues, it's actually not a contrast issue because the contrast is pretty good. It's not like those old displays where you tilt your head a little bit and everything just disappears. So yes, this is a picture of sand. It's really hard to take a picture of what white colors and light colors look like through this display. It has a kind of sandy texture, which becomes even more obvious if you were to move a uniform color around on the screen. It would reveal this texture. It makes reading documents, which usually have white backgrounds, a little less crisp than you would expect on a completely glossy reflective screen. Both of these monitors have this effect. The new one, it's more prominent. When I first got this monitor, I thought there was something wrong with the corners, and then I realized it was a significant backlight bleeding. So then I looked at my old monitor, wondering if I had back bleed on that too, and I actually had also pretty significant back bleeding on there. I just never noticed it before, and here is my MacBook, which has a mini LED display technology, and you can see it doesn't really have backbleed that exhibits in the same way. Now on a Mac, something we get used to on the laptop is being able to control the screen's brightness. There is third-party software you can install to change the brightness that actually controls the hardware backlight. It's not a software backlight. Although you can enable those two, and they're enabled by default, and I turned them off because I didn't like the quality of that. This app is called MonitorControl, available on GitHub. Again, if you're using this on a Mac, like a Mac laptop, you're probably used to this scaling interface, and it's exactly the same. So if there are times that you want a little bit more space, you can get that. I actually do adjust this occasionally on my own laptop, so it's really nice to be able to have that in a convenient and familiar way. When using this display side by side with a MacBook, one thing to note is that while the older generation of MacBooks and this display share a similar pixel density, the newer MacBook Pros that have the notch have an even higher pixel density, so the densities don't quite match up at their native resolutions. And here's a quick comparison of what this display would look like if it was a 4K display, where the scaling just looks totally off compared to the built-in MacBook display at both its high DPI resolution as well as its full 2K resolution. With the monitor plugged into the laptop giving power to the laptop, this test is a little weird because it turns off the second monitor after the first monitor reduces the power, but you will notice that when I turn the monitor back on, the secondary display does actually turn on quicker, and it was never fast to begin with. So these are both pretty slow monitors to turn on and off. These on-screen displays, I'm assuming all of the modern ASUS monitors have this same setup. Maybe some of the features are a little bit different. So as I'm digging through these menus showing what's available, there's a couple things I want to call out. The way that this monitor is configured when you first get it from the factory is it has power saving mode enabled, and there's something really wrong with that mode. It's like it doesn't refresh the monitor as quickly or something. I don't know. I didn't investigate it. I turned it off immediately and it solved my problem. Also, using USB-C, you have to use their USB cable, and you have to go in and change that setting to with the USB 3.2 in order to get data to transfer through it. And it also has a color correction mode with some sort of ambient light sensor that I didn't really bother testing and turned off immediately because I don't care about that. If you've never used a USB-C monitor before, I thought it was quite cool. I could just plug in an iPad, and when it thinks for a minute, it does work. Now, you can't use the controls and control center to adjust the speaker volume or its brightness. You can really only change whether HDR is enabled or not. This is an unfair wobble test. My point is showing that the old monitor weighed so much it contributed quite a bit to its wobbling, whereas the new monitor placed rather poorly on the arm fared quite a bit better. I never bothered to set up the monitor stand completely since I'm using an arm now instead. The design of the stand between the generations has changed a little bit. I used to be able to fit a 14-inch laptop securely on the base of the old stand. The way that it rotates is also a little bit different. But other than that, functionally speaking, they can all do the same things, including being tilted from floor to ceiling. We can attach a USB web camera to the display and get data through a single USB-C port. We might not be able to run a 4K web camera simultaneously, but we can certainly run a 1080p web camera. When I finally did attach my old camera to the display, however, the bezels are so thin it creates a notch. So now I gotta buy a new web camera. So who's this monitor for? I suspect that graphic designers and photographers are going to really enjoy this display. For folks coming from MacBooks with high density displays, I think you'll also feel really at home. If you're coming from a 2K display at the same 27-inch diameter, going to this 5K is going to be just right at home as well, but with the advantage of crisper text and images. Now, the vignetting and the backlight are significant drawbacks to consider. In my view, all the other things, the positives and the negatives, are really manageable and are more nice to haves. I think where this monitor sings is that the market of high density displays is pretty limited and the price isn't so bad, all things considered.